how exotic it is.
We are Sports!
All right, 7 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Dr. Damon Tanton is on the phone. He's the medical director of clinical practice for the Florida Hospital Diabetes Institute. He also happens to be a decorated U.S. Air Force veteran, so we thank him for that. And he's a board-certified, he is board-certified in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism. He's speaking to us about diabetes management and some of the advances in diabetes testing and monitoring. Good morning, doctor. Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Larry.
Real quickly, have we come to a point now, because you hear so many stories about people who've reversed diabetes, and I seem to remember once upon a time people would have said that's not possible.
It's a great question to start with because it emphasizes the importance of addressing diabetes early on. A lot of patients will wait until the complications happen, and many, if not most, of those complications are irreversible. So knowing your status early, knowing what your sugar is doing throughout the day, not just in the morning, but after meals, in the middle of the night, etc., helps the patient to avoid or at least postpone complications. And if that patient really takes control and engages, we can see a remission or a reversal of diabetes. We do see that sometimes.
But this only applies to type 2, right? The other type is that...
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, type 1 is when the pancreas is no longer functioning, and that is almost always irreversible. So this is but type 2 diabetes is the vast majority of diabetics. 25 to 1 ratio.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay, so the notes here say that you've got some information about some advancement in the testing. Is this something we do ourselves, or do we do it at the doctor's office?
No, this would still be testing that's done, at the lab that's affiliated with your physician. But the typical traditional test has always been the hemoglobin A1C. That's the one that most people, if they're going to, single out a test, that's what they say. And that's a 3-month average for your glucose control, and it's a fairly good test. But it has limitations, most notably that it's an average. And so patients can have a good average, but yet be having, ups and downs, peaks and valleys, which has been shown to be very dangerous to the tissues. So we have been introducing another test over the last year or two that's called the Glycomark, Glycomark, and that is a test that tells us what our after-meal sugar is. So still a blood test that you have drawn at your lab, but it's able to give us a 2-week window into the peak glucose levels, which is so important because most patients don't check their sugar after a meal.
Oh, really? And if you see your numbers, then do you change your eating habits if you're smart? I mean, is that the whole idea?
Well, it might be eating habits. It might be that we escalate therapy for medications that affect the after meal specific window. It helps us to tailor the regimen better because one size does not fit all for diabetes, and we have so many medications and interventions now. We just have to know which ones to use.
And since people are so much more aware now, I mean, you see commercials on television, hear the commercials on radio about self-home testing and things like that. Does that set more patients' minds at ease that they are getting the proper treatment if they have hands-on by themselves?
I think so. I mean, anything that can empower patients. They come to see us every 3 to 6 months. They live with themselves every day, right? So you have to have some self-care and be somewhat involved in your own process. And I'm not against the home testing. What I would say, though, is when you do go to your physician, it's important to know the full picture. And if we're just relying on one test that gives us an average, that can lead to a false sense of security. And we feel like our diabetes is under control when, in fact, it's going up and down and up and down. A lot of times patients feel poorly because their sugar is spiking or it's dropping, or it's spiking, and an A1C will not reflect that.
Is it supposed to spike if in a perfect specimen human being? Is that supposed to happen?
So we're not supposed to go over about 140 when we eat. Suffice it to say, most Americans do, because most Americans are pre-diabetic, or at least half of Americans are pre-diabetic. Once the sugar goes above 200 after a meal, then that's considered diabetes. But it's just a man-made demarcation. We're just calling it diabetes at a certain point.
I see. Okay. Well, I appreciate the call. Very short, but still very important. And
that's okay.
What we can leave the listeners with is a website so they can look at more. What is a good website?
The two websites, diabetes.org, that's the American Diabetes Association website, and then the glycomark.com, glycomark.com.
All right, good information. Doctor, again, thank you so much. We apologize for the short interview. It sounds like you had problems on your end. We had problems on our end, so it kind of worked out for us, but thank you for being on the air with us. Dr. Damon Tanton. We will take a little...
Thank you, Larry and Robin.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. The U.S.-led coalition in Iraq has identified the commando killed in a raid against the Islamic State group in northern Iraq.
Joshua Wheeler was the first U.S. soldier to die in the fight against ISIS, the first one to die in what you might call some type of combat role or a firefight since the U.S. pullout in 2011.
Fox's Leland Vitter.
The Pentagon says since he died during a named mission, which is Inherent Resolve, he is entitled to combat death benefits and eligible for combat awards such as the Bronze Star and Purple Heart.
Democrat Lincoln Chafee ending his campaign for the White House, and the strongest storm ever recorded in the Western Hemisphere heading for Mexico's Pacific coast, where homes and resorts are being boarded up. Hurricane Patricia, with winds of 200 miles an hour, expected to make landfall later today. Fox News, we report. You decide.
This is an announcement for all people who want to take a risk-free challenge to whiten their teeth in 5 minutes using clinically proven power swabs. This risk-free challenge is for people whose smile has been yellowed by coffee, tea, or smoking. It's so effective, we challenge you to try it for 5 minutes to see how white your smile could be. If lines are busy, try again. Dial 1-800-663-5922. That's 1-800-663-5922. 1-800-663-5922.
At Geico, we've been innovating car insurance for over 75 years with forward-thinking ideas like online quotes and the Geico mobile app. And to prove it, we'll play one of our first radio commercials from 75 years ago.
By Jiminy, Geico could save you money on your car insurance, which is what we'll be doing over 75 years from now. Who knows, maybe with some sort of application that's accessible on a futuristic handheld device. We'll call them online quotes.
See? Forward thinking.
Geico, saving people money for over 75 years.
It's time for Farm and Ranch headlines on the Southeast AgNet. I'm Tyron Spearman reporting. More details have been released on the peanut warehouse fire in Donaldsonville, Georgia last week. Officials called to inform us that there was approximately 7,000 tons of new crop peanuts lost in the fire, and none of the peanuts were salvaged. All peanuts were hauled to the landfill, and the loss due mainly because of the fire and water damage at the site. Another problem for the peanut industry right now has been the reporting of tonnage. And according to the Federal State Inspection Service in Albany, Georgia, they cannot extract the information off of the internet from Kansas City in working with USDA. Officials flew to Washington this week to see if they could work out the problem. The industry is in dire need of some information on how many peanuts have been harvested. Commodity Credit Corporation has announced they are going to sell 56,501 tons of peanuts from last year's crop. These peanuts are in storage. The deadline is November the 4th.
Farming has never been a sure thing. Pests, weather, prices, every day is a gamble. But there are some things you can count on. Propane gas is hard at work on farms across Florida, ripening and drying crops, flaming weeds and pests, warming greenhouses and barns, fueling tractors, generators, and other farm equipment. Whatever the job, Florida farmers know that they can count on propane to get it done. Clean, efficient, and reliable. No wonder so many farmers depend on propane, the exceptional energy.